25th.
25th, and this is the Plan Commission meeting. Can we have a discussion of possible action on the September 4th meeting minutes? Is there a motion?
I just have one, I was in attendance.
Okay,
at the
yes.
meeting.
We will make that correction.
Thank you.
Yep.
Sorry.
All right.
With that correction, I move to approve.
Okay, is there a second? Is there a second?
I wasn't at the
Second,
meeting,
I'll
so-
second it. I'll second my attendance.
The only one that can.
I
I
can
know,
second.
okay.
I suppose I could have seconded it.
That's
All those
fine,
in
it's all
favor?
good. Aye.
Aye. All right, thank you. We have a public hearing and discussion and possible action on an application for a conditional use permit for the master sign plan and signs over 135 square feet in the B2 General Business District. 3 signs proposed fronting on I-94 of 300 square feet and 45 feet in height between Badger Drive and I-94 and west of Gateway Boulevard, Hudson Center, LLC. Do we have a motion to open public hearing?
So moved?
Sure, second.
All right. All those in favor?
Aye.
Okay.
You want to ask for public comment, or?
Yeah, is there public comment out there for the hearing?
Would anybody like to address the issue?
Anybody?
Ask again and close it.
Thanks, Fred. Anybody? Do we have a motion to close the public hearing?
I so move.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Okay, this public hearing is closed. Discussing do we want to discuss that right away then?
Yes, Mr. David Robson and Mr. Brian Zeller here tonight representing Hudson Center LLC. Essentially, the proposal is to have 3 signs on the former visitor center site, now known as Hudson Center. There are 2 buildings on this site that have been developed so far. The proposal is for 300 square feet signs, 45 feet high, which essentially, because of the potential number of businesses, that's the reason the 3 signs are proposed. They're in conformance with the revised regulations on master sign plan. The only concern I have of the proposal is a 3 signs, of which we've limited the maximum signage for a business on one sign to 60 square feet. However, there would be the possibility that they could have the same business on all 3 signs. And is that what we really want from the perspective of, the reason the 3 signs are being considered is to try to allow enough space for all the potential businesses to be in that area. So I think if I have one concern on this plan, that would be the concern, which if you have 60 square feet on 3 sides, you have 180 square feet. Typically, a business would only be allowed 145 square feet of signage if they had the sign all by themselves per the standard sign. So,
May I ask a question? How many, 2 questions actually. What is the potential number of tenants in that entire section? Maybe I'm making you guess on that, but I would like to know that.
Go ahead.
Potential number of tenants.
You want me to answer maybe them, or do you want to ask both questions?
Well, let's do that one first.
Okay, so.
Dave, can you step up to the podium, please?
Sure.
Thanks.
So the answer to the first question is, in the first 2 retail centers that we have, there's potential for 14 tenants in those 2 buildings alone.
14.
In those 2 buildings alone, there's 7 suites per building.
Okay.
So that would, if we don't have any tenants take more than 1 space, that would take up nearly half of the spaces available on the signs already.
And would there be, listening to Denny's concern, let's say when this thing filled out, you had 26 tenants, and you had 4 blanks on the signs. Would somebody put a dupe up then, or leave? What would you do in that case?
They would be just Lexan plastic, so they'd just be clear plastic, yeah. It wouldn't be clear, it would be opaque plastic. And to answer Denny's concern, we have agreed to give Caribou until there's a need for another tenant to have 2 signs, but they're both going to be panels, so they wouldn't have more than 60 square feet,
So it'd be 30 square feet on 2 individual signs.
pylon signs. So I'm fine with you limiting it to be 60 square feet per tenant.
Well, yeah, I mean,
Whether it's
you
on-
have 60 square feet per tenant for a business per sign, but you
Yeah, but
don't,
if
yeah,
I'm
I
fine-
mean, if you're saying limiting it to 60 square
period.
feet per tenant for your total
Period.
signage, I'm fine with that.
Okay? Now, they would,
I guess the question,
they would have 60
then it'd
on,
be the maximum of having signage on 2 signs and not all 3.
right.
With that said, then you having, there's 2 sides to your property, that means you're not gonna have any signage then along Crestview or
We're not
anything?
proposing anything at this point. Doesn't mean we might come back at some point and say we want a monument sign by the entrance, but at this point, we don't see the need for it.
One last question, would you be against, signs being approved on a as-needed or ongoing basis? In other words, if we didn't say all 3 tonight, would that turn you over? I mean,
We'd want to build all 3 at once. It's cheaper to build all 3 at once,
okay,
and we're going to need all 3.
had to ask the question,
There's going to be 10 buildings probably in that whole complex,
okay?
so there's going to be a lot of tenants.
Very
And
clear?
they all want a sign on the freeway. That's just part of the nature of the beast.
Are these all just lit signs, or any of these digital and electronic
They're all
and,
backlit.
sorry?
They're all backlit, no digital.
Okay.
Yeah, so the rendering that you're seeing, it's literally, they take vinyl and put it on the white plastic, like the buildings we have now. And I have a slightly different rendering, an updated rendering. I want to show you. The only thing that really changed is this. I don't want to have it be flat because I think birds will sit there. And snow will sit there, and it's not going to look as nice long-term.
I have another question. You have a unique property in the sense that your distance from 94, the highway, or the visibility, or the distance, or both, are the closest of anybody around. I mean, there's no frontage road between you and your property, so with that being said, the visibility of your property is pretty darn good. I mean, the property's right on the road.
It is, but you have to remember that the retail buildings that are being constructed or constructed already, those will be somewhat obscured by buildings on the other side of the Badger Drive.
Okay.
So these tenants clearly need in their minds to have visibility on the freeway, which is a sign.
Okay.
I thought at one point, and maybe I missed it, or the description Denny was stating would be having possibly on 3 sides. I thought that you have a policy that they're only allowed to have their name on there once.
No, we're allowing Caribou to have one on 2 of the pylon signs initially. At some point, that will go away when we need a sign for somebody else. So Denny's point
At a
is
maximum of 30 square feet per.
maximum of 30 square feet per sign, so you'd have, it's a double-faced sign, so you'd have 60 on one side and 60 on another, obviously, so it'd be a
Yeah,
two-faced.
we only count the one
I understand, I
side.
just want to make sure that we're not causing a problem here.
So it is lit on both sides?
Lit on both sides, but it's not digital. Again, it's just vinyl on top of the plastic.
It's like the Perkins and
Right,
everything.
exactly, just like the development that we have now. We tried to make these look more like monument signs rather than pole signs. We think these are more attractive. And we actually copied a sign that's up in Maple Grove at that large development along 694 there in 94.
So Denny, you're suggesting that we put a clause,
A condition of approval would be a maximum of 60 square foot per tenant. I
Period.
guess the question is, do you want to restrict it, the only exception to that would be for Caribou until.
No.
well, no, but they are getting
They're
60.
getting 60,
No, I realize that, but they're on 2 signs.
so that's
You
60.
gotta allow other businesses to have that same 30 square feet on 2 signs or not.
Oh,
See, that's what I'm saying.
oh,
Right
yeah.
now, the only exception they're giving is for Caribou.
Right.
I see what you're saying.
Oh, I would say any tenant, maximum of 60.
Period, whether it's on one sign or 2
Let-
signs.
Well,
let
I'm just,
them-
That's just my
asking y'all,
thought.
I'm just clarifying.
Yep.
No, it's a good point.
Yep.
Very good.
Well, that brings up,
Here's
that
the
brings up
problem.
another point. Why, if, one of these spaces is 30 square feet, correct?
Exactly.
Okay. So what you're saying is we could possibly give the approval for 30 square feet on 2 signs, or 30 square feet each on two different signs for a maximum of 60. And then you
But
just
the
said-
ordinance already allows us to have, somebody could take, if they wanted to have a bigger sign on one panel, they could take two panels, and we could take the strip out between them, and they could have 60 square feet on one. So there's some options
What
there.
I'm trying to get away is the wall drug effect.
Right,
Right, right.
Yeah.
yep, and we understand that, and we sure don't want to make Hudson not an attractive community, because it's not going to help us.
All right.
Yeah, it seemed to make sense. I'm just talking out loud now, but if you're gonna allow 60 square feet, or, yeah, 60 square feet of signage, it seems to make sense to allow that on one side rather than 30 and 30.
I agree.
Yeah, I think I agree with that statement also.
So you would want it just to be, you would prefer it to be one side of a name, but the back side doesn't have the same name on it?
No.
No.
You have it on the same. When we count square footage on the sign, you want to count it on one side.
Right,
You can have a two-sided sign, but they can have 60 square feet on both sides. But that's what, by the sign ordinance, that's what constitutes 60 square foot. We'll count one side of the sign on the area.
So what we're saying is.
It's length and width.
Somebody could have two of these panels.
Right.
Instead of having one panel here and then one
Correct.
panel on another one.
right.
The wall drug effect, you're saying?
Yeah, that makes sense.
You see an issue with that?
We already have one that we've told them they can, so that's an issue
Well,
with that one
the
tenant.
city ordinance would trump what they already agreed to. Well, I mean, they can't agree to something the city's not gonna permit.
I think that makes more sense.
I do too.
Just to clarify, does the current ordinance, the square footage could be on two signs, but if it were on three signs, that we would definitely be tripping the square footage allotment?
Well, 60 square foot is the maximum
Okay.
square foot of signage per business.
Okay.
What I'm saying was that, I think the intent was to have 60 square foot for one sign, not to spread it on two or three
To spread it around.
signs.
Right. But to me, it doesn't seem like it makes a big difference, and I'm not you, so I don't get to decide. But whether you're 30 on one and 30 on another, that's 60, or 60 on one, seems to be the same answer. And again, when we're allowing somebody to have more than one pylon sign, we're only allowing them to have that until somebody else needs that spot. So it's gonna go away over time.
If I was another tenant and saw a guy with two signs, I'd want two too.
Right. But they gotta pay for two, they're not free.
Yeah, but that's not the point.
Well, it is to some level, because.
I mean, I know what you're saying, and I'm not disagreeing with you, but
Because if
that's
I
not
pay
the
for
point.
two, then I reconsider, do I want to pay for two?
Right.
So it's your decision.
No, you,
It just seems to me that 60 square feet is, whether it's on one or two, should be similar or the same.
Can we think of anybody in town that has two pylon signs for their business and has their signage spread out?
not that's legal anymore. I mean, McDonald's has two, but one's only allowed to be 20 feet high.
And you have
Bill's
to,
Fleet Farm has two signs. At one time, they could have two. One could be 100 feet high and 400 square feet. Then the second one was 20 feet high, and then we abolished a 100-foot high sign. And went down to one per business to try to eliminate the number of signs that were
and a typical pylon sign is what, 150 square feet, Danny, previously?
135.
135, so these are substantially smaller than a typical pylon sign. So, and their argument is at 60 miles an hour, 70 miles an hour, whatever people are driving on the freeway, that they're harder to read, so. And Caribou's thought is, if we can catch them coming eastbound or westbound, depending on which sign we're on, we got a better chance of getting them to come to us, at least in the short run.
Yeah, the argument I used when McDonald's talked the city into the 100-foot high signs was you got the freeway system that tells you in advance there's a Caribou Coffee or there's McDonald's or, I mean, that system, I mean, I use it all the time driving to find restaurants or gas stations. I mean, it's
You mean those blue signs?
those signs that the state allows.
At this exit, you will find this business, yes.
If they're eligible to be on that.
Right.
As soon as available room, right now, those signs
The
are.
problem is the highway doesn't make enough of those signs that,
Well, I think they have to pay for that.
yeah, but if
Yeah, they
you
do.
want it
Yeah,
you
there's a
don't
fee.
necessarily get it.
Right.
But even if you want one, doesn't, like Kevin says, doesn't mean there's availability. At some point, our signs could be full and somebody could come in and want a sign and there won't be one.
Right.
I think
Just like
there's
blue
a, I
signs.
think there's a waiting list of maybe 20 restaurants in Hudson right now to get on those signs.
My concern with them being on 2 signs is not necessarily that it'll eventually go away, is that how long will it take to fill the buildings that it will go away? Obviously, I'm hoping you fill them right away, but
Yeah.
you can't guarantee that, especially with this economy.
There's no guarantee, but the economy is pretty strong right now, and again, 14 tenants probably in this building. We've got 2 other buildings that are gonna be coming forward, looking to build their own buildings, there's 2 more. And then if we build another retail building, that could come close to filling it. So it should happen fairly fast. I'm thinking 2 or 3 years.
But you also don't build them knowing that they're gonna be filled right away. I mean, you tend,
We build them when they're
Right.
a percentage full, not
right,
like the Aldi's building.
right.
I'll move to approve, but I want to incorporate Denny's thinking or the 60 square feet issue that we don't want it above that as the guideline for this.
Well, by ordinance, they cannot have more than 60 square
Right.
feet.
Well, then how can he
Question is-
promise a guy a second sign? That's what I'm
He's
wondering.
doing 30
You're doing
and
30
30.
and 30.
It's still 60.
60.
He's doing 30 and 30 he's doing one with 30 and another one with 30.
Okay.
That's how he's promising him 2
Question is,
signs.
do we want to allow that, or do we want to allow 60 on
On
one
one
sign?
only.
I pull my thing back in.
I think it should be 60 on one only, but I'm one person. I just feel that these signs aren't new. People, and it's right along the highway. It's not,
Okay, I've got that.
I'm pretty certain that, I mean, I feel comfortable that it would be visible if you have it on one only. It's not, they're not gonna be right next to each other. They're fairly spread out too.
Yeah, they're fairly spread out. If you refer to this drawing,
Yep,
so what they're wanting is one here, clear to the west, and one clear to the east, and there's a clump of big trees right here, which causes some problem for some of those signs that are on the freeway, not our property, otherwise they wouldn't be there.
this is DOT's trees.
Yes, and they're all cottonwoods and nothing special, but I can't take them down because they're not on my property. So that's one of the concerns, is that the signs block some of the trees block some of the signs, so that's why they wanted to have 2 of them.
Can't they just choose to take the one that's not blocked? First come, first serve?
But the one, if you're coming eastbound, you're not gonna see the westbound, the farthest west one until you're way past the intersection, obviously. And you're not coming back to it.
But once all the spots get filled, then they may only be on one.
Well, the agreement
Spot.
we have with them, it says if they're on 2 and we need that space for another tenant, they have to give it up.
And they have to just pick which one.
Right, then they gotta pick one.
So they'd be content going from 60 down to 30 on one sign eventually?
They have to, yes.
I guess I would choose the 60 on one and guarantee that it's not big.
Just make one last comment. I don't know that we want that. I mean, our goal is to accommodate the signage needs of everybody. If the first 5 tenants came to us and said, we want 2 panels, you know, that would effectively be 10 panels gone. Our ultimate goal is to accommodate everybody's signage need, not the first come, first serve. Our thought is it doesn't hurt anything right now for them to have 2, because 2 are available. But ultimately, we want to be able to offer signage to everyone. We discovered in Banterra that, you know, we didn't have enough panels. So that's our goal, our intent, not to have everybody have 60 feet.
Right.
That's why we limited them to one later when we needed it.
No, I understand your intent, yeah. And I don't blame you for that.
Do we want to allow it for so many years? Could we do that, Denny?
You can put a stipulation, yeah. A condition of approval, yeah. maximum of X number of years for that? I mean, you got that one just for caribou and no others? I mean,
No,
are you gonna-
I'd say anybody can have 60 square, or 2 signs, or a panel on multiple
Maximum of
signs.
30 square foot panel on 2 signs.
2 signs for 3 years, 4 years, whatever.
If it's built out in 2 or 3 year or 2,
Well, if it's built out, then they won't have it. If it's not built out, then
right?
it doesn't go on forever.
Is there any concern
Is
to
that
any, yeah, I mean, yeah, I'm trying to bat it around. Is there any concern to any with the way it's being explained to us of the city not having control of that, or is that not an issue at all? In other words, the,
Well, we'd have to bring it back for review in a couple of years, I guess. Probably my biggest concern is we get other businesses saying, how come we can't have signage for 2 signs?
Yeah, because it's not just Hudson Center, there's other businesses along the highway. Maybe, you'd probably like 2 signs, if you could be more visible, or any of the other multiple businesses along the highway. I'm just not comfortable.
Keep in mind, each individual building, if it were its own platted lot, would be eligible for separate sign criteria. We're trying to do a master sign plan so that that's the only signage for that entire project. So you're not gonna have 10 lollipop signs. Well, we don't do lollipops anymore, but 10 45-foot signs. The intent is to have something that's aesthetically
Consistent.
pleasing and that still accomplishes the needs of the tenants. So just remind you that we're significantly less square footage.
Thoughts?
I again share Denny's concern and feel that 60 on one sign would be, or should be, because if you're opening it up to everybody else by making an exception, call it an exception, what are we asking for? I don't
Right.
know.
And I guess I would see it as, if they need that 30 square feet on that one sign, that they can, I don't understand why that can't be the agreement. You can have 60 on one sign, and if we need 30 square feet, you go down to 30 on that one sign. It's not my business to decide what they agree on, but signs can be adjusted for, I don't like I have a concern with Denny, that same concern as Denny too. I don't like setting something up where another business is gonna come along and say, well, we want
They've
an
got
extra
it, so
sign
we
on-
want it, yeah.
I think I agree with the multiple signs, that it could open up a can of worms for somebody in the future, but if it was a temporary thing, I think I'd go along with it for a few years, until the center gets built out.
Well, and if they're gonna build all of the 3 signs at the same time, rather than have blank signs on some of those, it'd be nice to at least have something on there, that it's not just one sign that has nothing on it, and you kind of go, is this vacant, or are they, what happened, everyone moved, or they're all gone? So, it's a short period of time, and they just have the 2 spots, and hopefully, as they fill in with their businesses, other businesses, they're gonna have to take caribou off at some point anyway. And then they'll just have the one.
I'll make a motion to approve the master plan with the stipulation that a business can have 30 square feet on 2 signs for a maximum of 3 years.
And then,
Well, then they'd be permitted. If a business came in under that stipulation, came in and asked for 60 square feet on the sign, initially, they're fine. And that doesn't have to change. But they're on that second sign, beyond 2 years, they're gonna have to give it up.
I would suggest that you say 3 years from the, in the construction, when they're completed, because otherwise 10 could come on 2 years from now, and get 3 years.
From the signs completed, you mean?
Right, rather than 3
Yeah, that's
years, they
fine.
get to go up.
Yeah, that's fine.
That's-
So
From when the signs are
I'm helping
completed.
shorten the time is what I'm trying to do, okay?
Yeah.
last guy in.
Right. Yeah, that was my intent. I just didn't state it
I
properly.
want to make sure it's clear.
Yep.
We have a motion, do we have a second?
I'll second.
We have a motion and a second on the floor. All those in favor of the motion?
Aye.
Aye?
Opposed?
Aye,
No.
I'm an aye.
You're an aye for in favor?
I'm an aye in favor,
So
yes.
3 in favor, 1 opposed.
And go to council on October 6th.
All right, thank you.
Mary, you were the opposed?
I voted opposed.
Oh,
yes.
no.
Okay.
Okay, thank you. On to number 4, discussion and possible action on a request by Michael Leverty in Northwestern Mutual for the city of Hudson to initiate the process to vacate or discontinue part of the dedicated public street area east of Second Street, State Highway 35 south of Cooley Road. Denny?
The city administrator, Devin Willey, received a letter from Michael Leverty that was in your packets along with 2 aerial photographs, one marking the general area of the right-of-way, and then secondly, an unmarked aerial photograph, just to give you some insight as to the location. The location of the area that Mr. Leverty is requesting a potential discontinuance. You have Second Street that runs south of Buckeye and Cooley, and then you have a side street on the west side of 3 residences that are between Dairy Queen and Northwestern Mutual Office Building. Mr. Leverty has purchased those properties. There's 4 lots and 3 houses. And what Michael would like to do is raise those initially, is not contemplating immediate development. But one of the issues that would enhance the potential for redevelopment of that is to get part of the right-of-way so that they could extend the commercial development. You know, it's zoned B3 Central Business District. The buildings could be up to the front property line. And by getting part of the, if the city would abandon or vacate or discontinue that street right-of-way, there'd be more room for development. The buildings could be pushed up. Potentially, they could have some off-street parking behind the buildings or to the sides of the buildings. So there's 2 processes for discontinuance of public streets. One is the city can initiate the process. The second is it's initiated by basically there's a circulation of a petition by Mr. Leverty that has to go for about a half-mile extent. It's somewhat of a cumbersome process. I think here is what the city potentially could gain from a street vacation. Now, we're not talking that the city's committing
Right.
to discontinuing that right away. We're already saying, will the city consider initiating the process? If the city initiates the process, it's much easier. There's 3 public hearing notices that are put in the paper in consecutive weeks, and then by resolution, the city can consider it. So, or the city says no to that, then Mr. Leverty could initiate by petition itself. I just think the city initiating petitions clean, and the only reason I'm even suggesting it, and I think that there's really not a need for all that right away. That street only serves 3 properties essentially, and those are being raised. And now again, I've expressed to Mr. Leverty, please understand, if the city would vacate that city street potentially, you're not going to get direct access to and from Second Street. You're going to use the same access that currently exists for Mutual, the Northwestern Mutual. That access is going to be the only access they would get. So that has to be understood. I guess the other issue is what role would the Wisconsin Department of Transportation play in a potential abandonment? They have interest in possible, part of that also, if they wanted to expand Second Street, particularly for northbound traffic, where they wanted to add stacking distance for either the right turn to Cooley Road or straight ahead up to Second Street, and make the left turn basically a dedicated left turn. And part of that right-of-way also may have, you know, DOT may have interest to to keep that as right-of-way. So the process would have to include DOT. I've already initiated contacts at DOT, I just haven't got a response from them.
So Danny, let me ask you a question on the right-hand turn there. I mean, to me, it would make obvious sense to extend that.
Now, if you look at it, it almost, I mean, if you look at the aerial photograph, you can see it.
That's the first thing that jumps out, is let's extend that, because I've
Well, I
sat
mean,
in that line
that's-
so many times trying to turn.
Well, it
and
plugs up the going straight, too.
But, I mean, what, the city and the DOT would want to work together to say, okay, this is how much right-of-way we need to keep. We're willing potentially to vacate the remainder of it, but the city and the DOT they're going to have quite a bit to say, and, well, they will have all to say in regards to how much of that would be discontinued, because and then the balance of the property that would be discontinued would go to the property to the east, which is Mr. Leverty, and then potentially could be used. Again, with the B3 Central Business District zoning, the buildings could be brought right up to the front of the building, similar to what's in downtown Hudson, and then the sidewalks are in the right-of-way that's remaining. But, essentially what the city and state would be potentially looking at is keeping a boulevard area wide enough on the east side of 2nd Street to have snow plowing, sidewalks, and those types of things. So those would all be issues the city would be looking at. I guess what Michael, if he wants to make comments, is basically, would the city consider initiating, the vacation? Then we'd work through the issues.
I think this is a great opportunity for some redevelopment in a part of town that, when you first come into town, it's kind of not, I mean, your building's beautiful landscape, and then you go to this next spot, and then, so, glad that you took that. The one question I would have, though, and, the welcome sign to town is right in that area, too. I would just ask, is there, I know it's not a deal breaker, but is there an opportunity maybe to move that or have that somewhere else? Because I think it is nice to have that when you first come into town, and you see that a lot of communities our size. Is there another opportunity for that?
Or maybe it could stay where
Unless
it is.
I'm,
Yeah,
unless
well,
I'm
no,
missing.
that's
It's
south
further
of.
south,
That's
yeah.
further
south of the
south.
Isn't that in this picture right here?
This one, or is it this
No.
one?
Well, there's the
It's further
second
south.
one.
Right, there's the two.
Yeah, I mean, we would look at reincorporating that
Okay.
somehow into the,
But
I saw it.
the big one is farther
the big one's
south.
further south.
So the big one's
right.
here is
Yeah.
closer
It's
to your building.
before
No,
Northwestern
no,
Mutual.
it's on the other side of the
Northwestern
the
Mutual.
sewage plant, isn't it? It's before,
Yeah.
it's before the sewage plant.
Mike's building.
Right, right.
The
okay.
big one is.
Yeah.
Okay, so it's just the small one, the one that they're avoiding now when they're doing all that work? Okay.
On a discontinuance or an abandonment like that, Denny, who assumes the cost? I mean, if there's gas lines there, if there's sewer lines that have to be stubbed and, shut
Well,
off and all that
yeah.
kind of stuff, I mean, who ends up paying for all that?
Under the vacation, I've advised Michael that he'd have to pay any associated costs for the publication of public hearing notices, those types of things, in behalf of the city.
And what about the land
but-
that he gains?
Well, then what will happen is that he would have to bring development plans in and which will include, and also, I mean, we've already rerouted the water line in anticipation this may happen, because the water line was gonna be redone. So I went to the water utility and said, please consider routing that out where it might be in the boulevard area in the future, so it's not
And that's what
going
they're doing
down.
now.
So that's part of what the process is right now. The question would be is then if the street was abandoned, the sanitary sewer could be either vacated and then, or where it's removed, and that's relined. But that would be at Mr. Leverty's cost.
And the land that he obtains would be sold to him by the city, or?
It's directly goes to him as adjacent property owner.
Okay.
Anytime there's a street abandonment, typically, you only have property on one side, because it's right away on the other. But if you on a typical discontinuance, half of the right of way would go to one side,
Right.
half the right of way would go to the other side.
And that would go back on the tax rolls, because now it's
Go
off.
back on the tax
It's off
rolls.
the tax rolls, right.
It would also allow for more building to be built on the property,
Right.
potentially, which would increase the tax base.
Sure. Denny, the curb cut that's between the three properties we're talking about and the insurance agency, is that
Only-
private land now, or is
And the only
that?
curb cut off of Second Street exists at Dairy Queen and at Northwestern Mutual.
Yeah, so that
That
one,
that would continue.
but is that a street now, or is that
Well,
private
that's,
property?
could be a little bit of
And what are you
both.
pointing to? I'm sorry.
This
entrance.
entrance?
Where
Oh,
the,
okay, thank you.
where the
entrance, the
sign
front-
is
Yeah.
that you think is what we thought was the sign.
I know, sorry.
No, I thought the same thing.
Essentially,
Good question.
you know, he's saying, you know, I'd like to pick up part of that right away. I mean, I think that the potential consideration by the city is to vacate part of it and city and state retain part of it because we're gonna need it for Second Street in the future.
Right.
Or to have enough boulevard, we can do snow plowing and we're not pushing it into the private property. But, and anything else that the city and the state does not need would go to him, and then, you know, there's no guarantee at any set amount, but I think anything that he could potentially pick up would enhance development.
Of course, yeah.
I 100% agree. The only point was gonna make is if that curb cut, or whatever we wanna call it, that driveway going in, if that's city property right now, maybe.
Well,
we'll-
part of
maybe
it
we'll
would be
include that in
city
the
property
vacation.
now, because it's like anybody else's driveway. The driveway 13 foot back or 15 foot back of the curb is city right of way.
Okay.
So, I mean, you know, we'd have, that'd be an issue, it'd have to be worked out, Kevin, you know.
I'm just saying let's include it if we can.
I agree with the whole thing. I would make a motion to have the city initiate the abandonment, or whatever the right term here is. Is that the right term?
Discontinuance.
Discontinuance, thank you, of the street and in question.
Is there a second to that motion?
Second.
Do you need anything else added to that motion, or is that good? All right, all those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? All right. Thank you. Is there any other business for, informational purposes? for
Just a
upcoming agenda?
reminder, on next Tuesday, we've got the joint meeting of the Common Council. There's a presentation, PowerPoint presentations available, you can take it home. If you want an electronic copy, I can provide an electronic copy to you, but I made hard copies for you.
And the meeting's here.
The meeting is here, correct.
Get here early and get a seat.
Well, you'll have
You'll be
reserved
here.
seats, so. Planning Commission and Council have reserved seats, so.
All right.
I move to adjourn.
Is there a second?
Second.
All those in favor? Aye.
Aye.
We adjourn. Thank you, everyone.